Because she moved to Arkansas.
That's where they're from.
That's what, yeah, that's what.
Wow.
Because Paul was in my building and he's her husband, so that's how I know this.
That's right.
And yes, and
It
it's,
works with Rainy.
yeah,
But they'll be working a year more.
small.
Maybe Shelley's gonna watch us. Okay, are we live?
Yes, we are.
Okay, welcome everybody to the June 27th edition of the Downtown Advisory Board. Let us start with a call to order. Myself, Chair, I am here. Kirk Sun, not present. Alan Pollock. Here. Charles Weathers. Here. Rory McManus. Yes, sir. Ryan Fechtel. Sarah No.
Here.
Kiana Chase. Lori Miller. Ernesto Toscovich. Okay. Agenda item number 3, the approval of our agenda. Are there any questions or comments before we move to a motion for that? Okay,
Move to approve.
if there's no further discussion, all those in favor of the approval of the agenda say aye.
Aye.
Those not nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Agenda item number 4, the approval of our minutes from our May 23rd meeting.
To approve.
Second. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor of the approval of minutes from May 23rd, 2024 say aye.
Aye.
Those not nay. Motion carries. Moving along to agenda item number 5, public comment. Do we have anyone here from the public? No. Okay. Moving along to agenda item number 6, action items. Action item A. Does the Downtown Advisory Board support cancellation of the July 25th, 2024 monthly board meeting? Sherry.
I'm proposing this just for several reasons. It's a summer month and you can see we have quite a bit of information you're receiving today. I don't anticipate any action items in July. And so I'm putting this in front of you to see if it's something you are in favor of doing.
And historically, I think we've done this.
Yeah.
It'd be so sad.
Plan on my vacations.
Well,
Field trip.
if there's no further discussion on that, do we need to make a motion for that? Okay, somebody like to put forward a motion?
Well, I move to cancel the July meeting.
Second.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, all those in favor of canceling the July 25th Downtown Advisory Board meeting? Say aye.
Aye.
Those not nay. Motion carries. We'll see you in August, but let's finish the meeting. Agenda item number 7, information reports. First and foremost, number 1, the Chariots project overview with Chris French.
So I'll cue this up just a second. There's been a couple times we've bumped up against projects that Chariots have put in place or Chariots has a requirement that a new development do. And so I realized that I actually have nothing that tells me those things that Chariots might be thinking about in downtown or that would impact downtown. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to have an overview of current or future plans that Chariots has in downtown. So I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me today. As they said, my name is Chris French. I'm the service planning manager at Chariots, and so my department does a lot of the short-term and long-term planning for the district, the transit routes, and we also for future development, transportation options. So in the downtown corridor, some stuff that has been happening and kind of probably spurred some of this is. It's not happening in downtown directly, but we have our Kaiser Transit Center on the north side of town, and we're in the process of starting with, or in the process of property acquisition very soon in South Salem, so we will have anchors on each end of town, which our goal is to have a route that continues all the way through downtown without going into the transit center and circling around. So it's more of a crosstown route without a stop in the center. So we can have a see between South Salem and Kaiser. So that's one item that we're working on, and also other crosstown routes as we develop Northeast Transit Center, probably in the future, having a crosstown route starting in the West Salem area and making its way out onto South Lancaster and onto Lancaster and south out north, to the Chemeketa Community College area in general. So those are changes. We currently have a hub and spoke system in the downtown corridor, which means everything goes out from the hub in the center and comes back. And so we're kind of shifting our thoughts, and we've played with it a little bit, but didn't have great success with having vehicles go into the transit center because it kind of broke the hub. It stuck to the hub and spoke instead of that crosstown route. So we're looking at having a couple crosstown routes that don't enter the transit center, which would have stops in the downtown area outside of the transit center specifically. And then there's been ongoing conversation with the city and our board and other community members about a downtown circulator route. We don't have specific plans, but it's still something that's in our planning process that we're continuing to look at what that looks like and how a downtown circulator route that connects downtown and people can get between the parks and state buildings, city buildings and businesses. So there's not a firm plan there, but it's a piece that it's been brought up a lot in the community to have that. And so stops in the downtown corridor to have a downtown circulator, you have to have the ability for a bus to stop and people have access from it for bus. That's something that is being worked on. And then in July, we're going to be kicking off a micro-mobility. So that is to look at micro-mobility, bike share, scooter share, or those types of projects. And we're not saying that they're happening, but we're doing a feasibility study to see if it's feasible and if it's truly needed. There's been some bike share, but there's lots of conversation around bike share, but we want to develop if it's feasible or how to implement it. Not just in downtown Salem, but in the Salem area and Kaiser. So that's a big project that's coming up. And then just Chariots in general, in September, we'll be kicking off our comprehensive operational analysis, which would be a good time for this group to be involved in that process. As we will be analyzing all of our routes and looking at what transit, if we're meeting the needs of the community, or if there's areas that changes are needed to be made, or how we can better serve parts of town. So that's coming in the future. Those are some the things that are really happening in downtown that specifically that I would be happy to answer any questions that you have.
My question, do you do all your studies and analysis like internally, or do you go out to third parties to get?
Yes, we most of our studies are use external organizations, so we support it and we do a lot of it. It's a collaborative effort. Also, bringing people in that have expertise from other areas where they've worked within doing similar projects. So yes, we do some internal and a lot of the COA and the micro mobility feasibility. Those would be outside RFPs that will go out to the consultant group that has done this.
And one other question, it doesn't relate to downtown, but you mentioned it in your first remarks, the South Salem location. Because I heard about this years ago. Where's the targeted area? Do you have one identified? You mentioned acquisition of land.
Yes, so it is at commercial and.
By the Walmart.
No, it's farther out, so commercial, we'll see.
It's across the street from Taco Bell and Bacon Parcel.
Got it.
The old former movies that are right in the movie theater.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the location that.
Those are different questions.
So Chris, when you go to determine where to put your route that you're talking about, where you're not going into the transit center, how do you, what's the analysis behind the conclusion that they go then, that the route goes right across the street from the transit center? So there's a transit center that's available and there's buses going in and out and there's noise associated with that. And where you're going to do the new uninterrupted, it sounds like, route is right across the street from the transit center. How does that work in, because they're not going in there, so they don't need that proximity, right?
We want, you want proximity with downtown, you have one-way couplets that go directions, so you're trying to get them as close to the transit center. People are still going to transfer between, it's not like the bus, it doesn't have that needed connection. But you want to have it be straight as possible, and most direct path, so that's. I don't know if that is good, but like, so when you go into the south side, going for a crosstown route. Going into the transit center, you coming down High Street, you enter on High Street, you then have to make a left on Church Street, you have to go down to, you can't make it, you have to go down to Marion, you get Chemeketa is too tight of a turn, so we can't turn on Chemeketa, and then you have Center Street, which is one way east, so you can't turn there, and so you go down to Marion, go back south. So we're wanting to be able to create a route that travels without out of direction travel to stay going straight with having the connection as close as possible to the transit center. So the other direction for that route that comes down High Street that would connect South Salem, we are considering and looking seriously at the Liberty Streets and staying on Liberty with that route. And so that's a block away from the transit center. So those are the final route, but we know going southbound that we come in on Broadway to High, and then it will jockey over to Commercial Street.
So the citizens apartment that they came in and talked about, the lady representing Beacon, the Diamond Lot that's east of the pit, the location for where the bus will pull off and then go straight that he's talking about is there. So if you're, a condition from the city is that development put in place the infrastructure for that. And so, you know, just because you all are connected with downtown and you might hear things from the development community, that is something that now developer is having to put and add into his cost and his project, and probably will impact the number of ground floor units that they're going to do in that particular location. Again, that isn't Chariot's saying to do it. The city supports and is part of the condition for them moving forward with the city. The other piece with regards to the downtown circulator is this board has been very concerned and has raised concerns about parking capacity. And so and part of it is because we don't have any history yet. We have all these housing units being built. Parking isn't required anymore. So there's very few parking spaces on site for 100+ units. So, and we're implementing paid parking. which is critical to the city's general fund budget and to support the parking structures. So we don't know yet what it's gonna look like when we put paid parking, which is gonna push residents that are parking on the street into the parking garages. More people than going into the garages customers because they're not gonna wanna pay because we're gonna keep it free in the parking garages. So there's already a slight heightened sensitivity to, are we gonna have all the parking that we need to support citizens apartment, block 50 across the street, the pit, some of the stuff that's going on. So when you mentioned a bus stop in conjunction with the circulator to move people from the parks, would that remove a parking space?
I'm not saying that we're removing any, I'm saying in order for that to come to, in order for a downtown circulator to be able to be a viable solution, there are going to have to be stops, right? And we have some stops that we aren't currently serving that were built, and those are stops that I'm sure you and I have talked about. We don't want to give those stops up until it's decided very clearly from both the city and other community leaders that we're not going to use that because the stops already exist. So if you take and make those parking again, and then we say the community decides similar to something like what Monmouth and Independence have done with their trolley, that the city of Salem wants to do something like that in downtown, and we're going to have stops, then in order to implement that, you have to take parking from it. You would be taking parking to implement something like that. So there with the downtown circulator, there's no like plan like we need stops for it because we don't know what it is, but there's a couple stops within the downtown core that aren't currently served by a bus. But to take and convert those back to parking would be that at some point in time, if the downtown circulator came into effect, that we would be re-asking to take parking from those.
So there's no timeline for implementation of circuit.
There's a thought that always that comes up continuously when we have public
We
meetings.
do outreach to a lot of people, maybe we should have a circulating, which I generally support. Really to move people in and out of downtown, state offices, that university, the hospital, and some of the neighborhoods adjacent to downtown. How do we move people around? One of the examples, well, if I'm a state worker, I can walk downtown, have lunch, but I want to kind of get back. So they can use the circulator, it gets people into the central business.
Well,
We gotta
transit
call
will
for the
be
question.
really important because we know that there's gonna be a need for an alternative to vehicles. And see, it's just the timing. We don't know yet what it's gonna look like once paid parking comes into place, the pit's built out, Citizens is built out. But there's already concerns because the board has brought it to me. What are we thinking this all means at the end of the day? Well, part of it is we would like you to think about an alternative mode of transportation. Certainly Ribbonwood, they have a kiosk and stuff and you can find out bus information all the time. But removal of parking spaces is always a sensitive issue. And just for this board looking into the future, knowing as much as they can as to what might the future look like, it will help inform them. Because the only bus area for the circulator that I know is the one across the street because of the art pedestal that we put in the streetscape. Is there another location that has that?
There's the where I on Liberty, Liberty Checka, stops, there's a stop at church. There's a few of them around.
Liberty.
So what he's thinking, so we recognize paid parking is an opportunity. We
Yes.
support downtown.
Yeah.
So we need to look at that. And I think one clear thing to talk about when we talk about a circulator, it's not the 40-foot bus. It's a smaller van size, so it's nimble, don't need much space, and they can get around and be more frequent. One of the things that we do once we get to that point, and we say, hey, we need to explore this further, would be to engage the downtown business community. Work group to help us figure out the route, where is the likely places we want to stop. It's not just us overlay a certain areas. We need to learn these spots.
I think you should consider horse drawn carriage. Meets climate goals, it's historic, and with the. It helps with the bike sharing.
Well, just, there has been a time where coming out of Vision 2020. We did a Chariots worked with the Downtown Association to implement a small thing that went every 15 minutes between the state of Oregon, because the state of Oregon was represented on the Vision 2020 task force in a very prominent position, and they were very supportive of trying to get the state employees to come downtown to support downtown differently than they had. And it ran every 15 minutes, I think. I don't know how long.
Is that the one when Wednesday, first Friday, back then? We did it like one day, a month,
Yeah, and
nobody knew.
and so, well, see, the state was supposed to be marketing it as part of their role in Vision 2020. So it has come up. I mean, what he's talking about, I know it's just like grocery stores come up every time I have a focus group. Where's our grocery store? I'm sure it does come up for you. Can we find a better way to get it right? I just wanted you guys all to know that there's that piece in downtown that touches, you know, the future for downtown too. It's just the timing of how everything plays out. And I wasn't there straight later. But it's good to know.
Even possible, they can help support parking. Like people park there and that could be a stop by a parking garage, and move people to shops. People take the bus downtown, they're gonna get up downtown train center. If you wanna go to somewhere commercial, it can be a long walk. And maybe not on a certain way.
Well, especially if you're older or if you have high heels on or something, you know, yeah. Well, it determines if you're gonna park on the street or, you know, well, the symphony, the shuffle, through the.
Yeah, Church Street doesn't bother me so much. That's kind of how, kind of where everything is happening, but, again, I wasn't aware of that, so I was just, and I am aware of, but I didn't know it was for the circulator. The car out across the streets like that.
None of them are, they're all bus stops that have served routes or services at some point in time. Some of them, I don't know why they were there. I have been with the district for 22 years. So
I could say 23 years, I don't remember a bus ever pulling up out there, so it must have been before our time.
yeah, so yeah, I don't have all of the answers, but those stops in thinking that when we're thinking about long-term and like removing parking, removing somewhere where we have history of having a stop and taking it out and putting parking there, it's easy to take out and put parking there, it's hard to get it back, and so that's one of the pieces that as we're looking at stops or curb extensions that are long enough for the bus to actually, that bus to serve, but we really would like to keep those to not and not have to take part.
Kind of a random question, but like several months ago, Councilor Stapleton was in here and we approved a allocation of funds for a study for downtown for lowering the speed limits. Is there any attachment to your team with Chariots with that process?
No, I think that wasn't tied to me.
Mutually exclusive.
Right.
We were pretty close to the city. A lot of activities. Yeah, there was this idea called speed. Buses.
No, no, across the route, if you play that on a bus while you were doing it.
Let the minutes reflect.
We need single priority.
Yeah, there you go. Okay.
And we figured you'd talk with the city.
Yeah, it's pretty regular.
Yeah, we have monthly meetings with the city. Projects that the city is working. On. Just
And it's a good relationship. They're here in the room. It's good.
I got more meetings.
that's not
I got meetings.
public. You're not at those meetings.
I definitely get invited.
Good.
And if it's not me, it's Tori.
Good.
But it's not usually downtown we're talking about. Actually, it's, you guys are doing a lot of stuff in areas where there isn't any service. And so a lot of it's talking about where are you going and then the infrastructure to support the sidewalks and the rest of it. To put it in those locations where there isn't anything. So that's a lot of what it's talking
I guess another random semi-related question to downtown, the city just got awarded a federal grant for Front Street for pretty much the entirety of Front Street. Is there connection and coordination with the city on the work that's to come with that grant that was received?
That's, I just heard about the RAISE grant that's coming up.
RAISE grant.
Yeah, the RAISE grant, that is great news.
Yes,
I haven't had a chance, but I'll put that on my list to have whoever's on point at, Public Works for that project, whoever wrote the grant and stuff, the application. Any of us, because we've been talking about north is where the opportunity is, so that, you know, thanks for bringing that up. I don't know who the staff is on point for that, but I heard that we do get.
gold stars all around. Well, is there any more questions for Chris? Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Okay. Information reports, item number 2, overview of conflict of interest rules with Brian Luce. Welcome back to that, Brian.
It's from beginning.
That's
Sure, thanks for getting this off the agenda.
Good afternoon, Brian Lewis, I'm the city attorney, and I've been with the city about 7 years. One of my roles is to do public records, public meetings, and ethical considerations trainings for public officials and board members. So congratulations, if you're new to the board, you are now a public official, and with that comes with additional responsibilities and restrictions. So with that, let's get started. What is a public meeting? What the purpose of? Well, overall, public boards and public officials should be conducting their public meeting business in an open and in a fashion that the public can participate and understand what decisions and deliberations these officials and public boards are making. So we stream on YouTube, we have notes, we make things available to the public so that they can participate. But there's certain rules and restrictions and things you can and can't do at public meetings. And there's been some issues in the past that we'll talk about, not with this board. Public policy and the purpose for public meetings. Any decisions, deliberations, considerations, documents, they're all done in public in a fashion that are done in the open for the public. They have to have notice of when the meeting's going to occur and make it available either online or the newest technologies that we have, or an in-person meeting or hybrid version, and accessible for all. Well, what is a public meeting and who is subject to it? Right. A public meeting law applies to all decisions of governing body, of a public body, in which a quorum is present, is required to make decisions, to make a decision or deliberate towards a decision on any matter. A public body is the city or county or any other subdivision of the state, and the governing body would be our city council, and you guys are an advisory board. It makes decisions and recommendations to later go on to the city council. So this board is subject to the public meetings law. Governing body means any two or more members of a public body that have the authority to make decisions or recommendations. A governing body to the city includes not only the city council, but all boards, advisory commissions, such as CHSC and DAB. What meetings are subject to the law? Run into each other, we chat about things. Well, meetings can be a governing body for which a quorum is required to make a decision. Public meetings also applies to a meeting, even if the sole purpose of the meeting is to gather information about a decision. Our previous presentation regarding chariots was no decision made, it was an information report, but it's, you know, information that this board may use. Recommendations to council at the time. Well, when we have a quorum of members of a board in the same place at the same time, does that automatically make it a public meeting? Not necessarily. So if you all end up at the same restaurant at the same time, it's not necessarily a public meeting, but you could turn it into one if you're not paying attention to the rules. What's not a public meeting? Social meetings, less than a quorum. If we had less than the requisite number of folks here today, we wouldn't have had a public meeting. It's just not possible. Yeah, rules and what's required. On-site inspections is also, it's not a public meeting, but it will, if you guys wanted to go look at any of the sites downtown as a group, you wouldn't necessarily have to, notice it as a public meeting. But there's certain restrictions on what things you could or couldn't do on that site. You could deliberate, you shouldn't talk about things beyond the information regarding the site visit. This one here. Okay. Here's the pitfalls that occurs. This one was, I don't know, 13 years ago at this point. When we have these new technologies, we have internet, we have WhatsApp or whatever, any of the texting messages, we've got video conferencing, things along those lines. You just have to be cognizant of what you're doing and how you're doing to ensure that you're not going live in public meetings. What happened in Dundee, which was a Lane County Board of Commissioners, one of the board members said, for example, if this board was going to make a recommendation to city council regarding, let's get a downtown circulator. So if, board member one drafts up an email, hey, I'm thinking we should consider making a recommendation regarding, a chariot circulator. And then emails it to another board member, not everybody, but just another one. They add their little, I think it's a good idea. And they forward it to another person to get there. So when you have this serial, one at a time deliberations between independent board members, it flies in the face of the open meetings laws. What should have been done is it should have been discussed in a public meeting. Now, what happened with that case is there was a complaint against the public officials of the County Board of Supervisors. An investigation was held, determined that they did violate public meetings laws by doing a serial email communication. You can also violate it if one of the board members went in and talked to one board member and then talked to another board member, had discussions about things beyond social. As a public official, the city attorney's office does not represent the official, you represent the city. So if you have a public meetings complaint against you, it's an individual thing. You have to defend it yourself or hire an attorney. Ultimately, the Lane County Board of Supervisors, individuals found to have violated the public meetings laws, cost them about $20,000 personal liabilities by their county insurance or anything along those. So you want to be very cognizant not to inadvertently. In this case, it looked like they were intentionally trying to subvert the public meetings laws, hence the large accidents happen. So reporting is a good thing. And then the county had to pay a large sum of money. So. Lessons from Dundee. Emails can be dangerous, texts can be dangerous. Make sure that if you're sending information, it's not something that should be conducted in a public meeting. You have to be careful when you're hitting the forward button. Do things in public. Do them at this meeting and keep any other communications to a social or in cases, we're gonna have emails about availability for time for meetings, be there. That's deliberations of city or DAB business. We have a handy B lane now, so we had fight within the Lane County Board of Supervisors after the first public records complaint. And there was a follow-up issue where members of the board were found discussing an email that was supposed to come before the commission. And one of the individuals put there, you know, here's my position, and hit reply all. The original email was, you know, we're gonna set up a meeting, it's gonna be at this time, and an individual fired back to everybody, well, I think this is whatever, not a great idea, or was deliberating and created a public meetings violation just by hitting reply all, adding context to what was originally just a, you know, a meeting scheduling. That one was also investigated and was a public meetings violation for the public official who hit reply. But since there was no intention to, you know, violate the public meetings law, there was no fine associated with that, but there was still the hassle of going through that investigation. So be wary of emails, you know, before you hit send, make sure you have an accidentally reply to all, or you include your personal thoughts and something that should be created in public. Pull out my phone and say this is one of the worst things ever invented when it comes to public records in public meetings. If you're emailing other folks or texting other folks, please remember that as a public official, everything you do as a public official for DAB is subject to the public records laws. So if you're, you know, if you want to include, if you're saying, hey, we are scheduling a meeting for X, Y, and Z, that's not the texter. Best to use your email, she'll have that official public record. What we don't want to have later on is some judge saying, we need your phone, we're gonna make a copy of it to determine all the public records that are on your phone, see whether you failed to dispose of them. So if you're going to use your personal devices or personal emails, just remember those can be subject to a court order. I've heard of it and actually was involved when I was attorney in Arizona for a public official. We had a phone order to be turned over so they can get a copy of. We're not phone, the IT folks take care of that. So be cognizant of that. If you respond to Sheree, if she sent out an email, can reply, you have to, you know, maintain that public record so that you don't have to. So try not to create public records outside of public, you know, city channels. What's a public record? You know, we're all subject to them, we all create them. It's any information that's prepared, owned, or used, obtained by a political subdivision, state, relates to an activity, transaction, or function of that entity. It's necessary to satisfy the fiscal, legal, administrative, or historical policy requirements. It's anything that we generate that memorializes activity of the city. That's really kind of it. If you say, hey, you want to go out for lunch, everyone reply that it's not a, you know, decision of the city, it's of personal nature, and we create a public record. We have to maintain those public records and dispose of them. State law. Public official ethics. Well, what is a public official? Well, here's where all the information starts. And this is just an overview. I don't know. No. Must.
Oh, I thought that was weird, so try it again. Might have done.
You can turn it off.
It's weird. So it's
We've got-
There's not enough for everybody.
Yeah, you can share. If this starts working again, I'll move forward.
yeah, it kind of froze. Okay, here comes our time for it.
Three main subject areas for public officials to. Yep. You got it? Thanks. Three main subjects of ethics that we need to talk about are conflicts of interest, gifts, and use of the office. Who the public official ethics laws apply? Well, it applies to public officials, which all of you are now, your relatives, and for gifts, members of your household, and any businesses which are associated with them. So there's some things you have to think about if you own a business here downtown, really great city. Public official means elected officials like our city council, appointed officials like you all. I'm a public official, Sherry's a public official, is for employees, and then we also have agents on occasion. Person is a public official, even if they don't receive any payment for their services. So your public official, you like that. What's a business mean? Well, I run a business in downtown. Private business entity, corporation, LLC, franchisees, could be a self-employed. Does not include 501c3, so if you run a 501c3, however, public official is only a member of the board and does not receive any payment. So if you work for a 501c3 and get paid, you're gonna have, it's not gonna be exempt from this. Where do you find your information regarding public official ethics? Well, in our Salem Revised Code, Chapter 12, it's based on state law, but we're actually more restricted than state. State gives us a set of rules, and the city of Salem decided we wanted it to be stricter. Oregon revised statutes indicate any action or decision or recommendation by a person acting in capacity as a public official, the effect of which would be a private, pecuniary benefit or detriment of a person or person's relative or any business which they have. Our SRCs, we get even more restrictive. It's not just money, it's any benefit or any detriment. It's not just dollars. More broad, swaps, trades, and even SRC 12.015A, any benefit or detriment creates a conflict, not only a pecuniary benefit or any detriment. So that's something we're a little more restrictive. Not every city is like that in the state code. So just be cognizant if you're getting a benefit because of your participation on the DAB, you may want to take a second look at that or admit disclosure. That would be an action. You can have a potential conflict of interest. What happens there? The state law is any action or decision that could be a private pecuniary benefit or detriment. So it kind of looks like you're getting a benefit. You have a business here, you're gonna get a chariot, you vote to have a chariot stop in front of you. Now, it's no direct financial benefit to you. That's something that could be considered a potential conflict of interest. If you have actual conflict of interest. Conflict of interest, well, if you have that, or either is, if you have an actual conflict of interest, you will have to disclose it and you won't be able to participate. If you're selling, if this board was gonna make a recommendation, you know, that the city should acquire this piece of property to create a Chariots, you know, downtown circulator, it happens to be your own property, you're gonna have to disclose that, and it's best to just sit out and take no action, all of that, disclose it. If you're across the street from it and it doesn't look right, you have an obligation to disclose it. If you actually have to abstain, but if you have a potential, hey, I'm gonna disclose it to the public, this is what I think it's just a potential conflict of interest, or it looks like there's gonna be a conflict of interest, disclose it. Depending on the circumstances, you may or may not be able to participate based on your own understanding of the conflict. We are even more restricted. We don't like it if there's an appearance of impropriety. If it doesn't look like everything's above board to the average member of public committee getting your attention, we want you to go ahead and say, hey, this is a potential conflict of interest. You just go out there and be as transparent as possible, and then we don't have any issues later on saying, hey, you didn't disclose, you had a conflict. We encourage to get those out in the open early, and it's a problem later. The appearance of impropriety, another one we have an SRC that's broader, more restrictive than in state law, are bound to observe in their official capacity the highest standards of morality and to discharge faithfully the duties of their office, regardless of personal consideration. Their conduct in both their official and private affairs should be above reproach. All training in the eyes of members of the public. Fair and impartial fulfillment of duties. Well, as a public official, you can't contact a counselor to obtain preferential treatment, except for example, city manager, but we don't have to deal with that at an advisory board. No use of city property for private use. No public official can grant any special privilege to any citizen beyond what is available to others. So we don't want to play favorites. Sometimes you guys are provided some information, and we provide information that is subject to public disclosure at the time. Negotiate a real estate deal, and it's along those lines. We'll make the information public, but not during the negotiation period. Can't disclose confidential information without legal authority or approval, and can't use any confidential city information to advance financial, your own financial gain. As mentioned earlier, consequences for violations of public meetings, public records, and other issues. State, there are civil penalties, forfeitures, sanctions. City, you go so far as you can be removed from office, and we also have a broad authority to act accordingly, unforeseen or really unique situations. Where do we find our information for public officials? Chapter 62 of the charter applies to elected and appointed officials, requires disclosure of certain gifts, relationships, and campaign contributions. Requires recusal if presence of gift, relationship, or contribution creates an appearance of impropriety in mind of a reasonable person. Complicated exemption procedures for necessity. Not gonna generally. Everyone has a conflict on this board because it involves something in downtown, applies to everyone, that everyone would technically conflict out. So there are some special issues. A big issue here is to remember compliance with ethics laws is a personal responsibility. You must comply with both the state and city, and more restrictive provisions always control. So if you're following the city rules, you're also following the state rules. Well, if you have a question, where do you go? Well, we're the city attorney's office. Our client is the city, the Salem Housing Authority. And in regard to state ethics laws, we do not represent public officials in their personal or professional capacity. Cannot even rely on advice. If you asked, like, hey, Brian, can you write me up your opinion whether you think this is a conflict of interest or not? Assuming that I would do that, as in the original Dundee case in Lane County, they asked the city attorney for a letter asking whether what they did was if they did it, would it be a violation of public meetings? City attorney writing a nice lengthy opinion that is what we had explained that. You can't rely on the city officials, you don't give any free outs on this. You can't rely on legal advice from counsel, and city attorneys, we can guide you through the process and show you where it is, but we can't tell you what to do. If you need to go seek advice for unique situations you put in, we do have Oregon government ethics commissions for public officials. They can give you informal advice. You talk on the phone, it's not going to protect you. They can give you, one of the staff members give you advisory opinion on whether it's good, that still doesn't protect you. They would have to give an official formal opinion, and those can take months or even longer. So just beware. We also have a few more areas that you can get some information or help. We do have a city hearings officer who will receive and initiate ethics complaints. They will hear and investigate ethics complaints, and they will render advisory opinions or interpretations. Again, those will be non-binding, but give you at least somebody else's opinion independently looking at. If you need to have that or ever need that assistance, you can contact Dan Etch, our city attorney, or myself. Uh, That was the last one. Do you all have any questions?
So Brian, I guess I have a question going back to your example of the chariot stuff. So if I have a property, or I have a family member that has a property, and I'm on a board, and there's a subcommittee that's created to identify potential locations for a bus stop. And even though there's more than me on the subcommittee, I want to lobby for or influence having the bus stop by my property, because my property increases by that. Now, you know, my tenants have access, they're not walking 2 or 3 blocks. I am not though the one to approve this. I am just a person on the subcommittee, and that subcommittee goes back to the board, and the board is making a recommendation to the agency. But your overview of benefit, you know, which is different now, this time I'm hearing it, than what I thought in the past had to be financial. And now it's just benefit, which is new to me. What should I have not gone on the subcommittee? Should I not? So I go on the subcommittee, I influence it, but I don't vote at the board thing. I mean, how does that work?
The appropriate action in that case, if you had, say your sister owns the property, or, you know,
Okay.
they're gonna receive a benefit, and this could be a detriment, I suppose. You're not making the final decision, city council would do that, but you're still a public official on a board making a final decision of recommendation, which can then be adopted, modified, or rejected by the city council, but you still have an official DAB recommendation, which is a final recommendation. In that case, you would, the public official at the beginning of the process of that particular issue would say, you know, I've got a potential conflict of interest, you know, this is an appearance of impropriety potentially. You know, my relative owns the property in front that we may have to purchase a strip of to create a stop, or we can turn a stop on. You know, I just wanted to make the members of the public aware of this, if I can be receiving any direct benefit or payment, however, relative may or may not receive any benefit or detriment on that night. You know, I just wanted to make that clear in the public. Then you have to make a personal decision whether you think that disclosure is sufficient, and whether you should remove yourself from the process and abstain or participate. You know, I could see that going either way in that type of situation, but certainly if you disclose it at the beginning and you know, probably work through that, if it's not out in public. If it was your own property, I think that's an actual conflict of interest to you have to disclose and abstain, which happens on council and others, because the city hits so many places. It's in the city, so that comes up next time. You know, disclosure. It's a way to go to ensure that you don't have somebody later, you know, claiming that you have a conflict of interest. If you disclose, talk about things at the very, very beginning, it's on record, it's public official, I disclose, and it's your decision, and but they checkmate yourself and say that, so that's how.
So that example would be the same if we were looking at guidelines for something, a program or something that if the guidelines were this, I or somebody that could benefit from it, if I influenced it this way, even though I'm not the one approving it, I am influencing it to benefit that, because again, we have a lot of things that we do that are great, but a lot of it is depending on how you look at it, could be a benefit.
Yeah, I mean, council and recommendations from this board can benefit the community as a whole. It's benefiting the community as a whole as much as it's benefiting yourselves, and it's really not, conflict you really don't have anything. If it's disproportionately affecting you or your relatives, then it's something that's good. But if you're, voting to do on-street parking versus not on-street parking, those types of, it affects the community as a whole, and there's no if it does somehow affect you, the financial or any other, that's something you have to bring up. But if there are things that apply to you, same as everybody else, then
Well, I have a question. Okay, so on the parking. It could have, I manage the Equitable Center, so I have lots of tenants that have to pay that parking tax, right? So if I vote to have paid parking on the street, I'm kind of trying to benefit my tenants, therefore benefiting my owner, my boss. I mean, is that kind of a conflict?
that one's kind of a direct benefit financial that you could actually paper out. That you work for a company that have a direct financial benefit from this decision. One, I guess you compare the other, it's either status quo and they'll have to pay the tenants, will have to pay their downtown parking tax. But if you vote to get rid of that downtown parking tax, that could be something that you could disclose, and you'd have to make whether it's an actual or a potential, it certainly meets appearance of impropriety at the minimum, which doesn't, once you disclose the potential conflict of interest, then there really isn't that appearance of impropriety to disclose it. So we try to avoid all those things just by disclosure. So in that particular case, made it noted, just saying I would, as tenants who, and there's hundreds of these, so the disproportion, no, maybe not, but we want to disclose it, and depending on your thoughts on it, you either participate.
How far back does it go? Shree's point of making some guidelines and such, and I understand we played that down, but if it wasn't that, it was a bit more concrete. And that's year A, and it's now 2 years past. Well, now that's coming back around because things don't always happen quickly, but a lot of us are on board for a long time. Is it only current action, or do we have to go, by the way, I was part of this 3 years ago, just bringing that up now?
Depending on the nature of it,
I mean, is there a statute?
on statute of limitations on disclosure for that.
Yeah.
Oh, not that I'm aware of. I don't think that there's a statute of limitations.
Follow up, then if made these decisions, when a member of DAB put it off the board next year, under another, so it's all good to do whatever you want once you're not voting. You made those choices while you were one, you benefit from later on.
Well, at the certain circumstances at the time that you should or should not have disclosed is personal public decision. Whether DOJ, how far DOJ back, or conflicts of interest or failure to disclose, we'll get them. It's the intentional ones that are the eye of the Department of Justice. We are intentionally trying to subvert the rules. If you make a decision now and later on you happen to, if you made a decision to recommend buying this piece of property, okay, and then you're off the board. 5 years later, you somehow come in possession of that piece of property through inheritance or something. Or just you chose to buy it later. That's different than the time you're a public official. You're re-rating after your period of evidence, but you can't use any confidential information or anything else.
Okay, 2 more questions. How do we know it's confidential?
That's
Does it get like a big stamp like on that?
Actually, yes, sometimes it does actually become privileged information, but we generally use a draft watermark confidential or something. They're not required, we don't require them from the public, but if they send us information as part of the development project or something along those lines, they'll mark that confidential. It's not subject to disclosure or any public rules. It meets certain criteria. So staff will inform you if something that you have is conflict.
We've never had that
Yeah.
so far because basically, because of what you just said, those things that fall within it. So it's not uncommon if somebody gives me something on a project where it has rents or potential something that they don't want. It could hurt their ability to be feasible and successful. It's not uncommon that that stuff doesn't become confidential in the file that I'm working on because it could or could not, if there was a public records request, lawyers go through it, it could be pulled out, but to be safe, anything that is kind of proprietary and if somebody knew it, it could influence the success of your project. I've only dealt with financial, but you know, when we had, sorry, I forgot her name, the lady who need to talk about citizens department. She didn't pass out her pro forma, any financial information to anybody. Where I guess if she was going to, that would have been my advice to her, you know, you need to put that's confidential on it. But we haven't ever had any in the time I've been here, no confidential documentation has been distributed.
My final, most important question, outside of doing these presentations, how many times a day do you use the word peculiar?
Last time I used it was the last time I did one of these. So I can barely say it.
So Brian, you don't touch on this, but I'm just curious. So I am a board member and I know another board member on my board. And I know for a fact they have a conflict. Breaks every rule for a conflict. It's a personal thing, you said. Only the person that has it.
Well, they have to make the decision.
But I'm saying, so it's up to them,
Yes,
even though I know it. It's up to them to declare it. I could, I guess, as a board member, be the one to file the complaint, which, you know, but that's really the only recourse I would have. Because it's up to the person with the conflict to declare.
there was a complaint received. Hearings officer would investigate that. The city could take corrective action as the. You can't force someone to say to not vote or.
I told you this. I learned my lesson on that. Only the person can take it. I can't help, got it, okay. There has been times, Charles probably knows, where I honestly thought it was, it appeared to be a conflict, so I would say that there's an appearance of a conflict, and I have learned that was not, that was not my place. It's up to the individual. So I take it. Doesn't come up. We've had times though where seems like every single person, sorry, Ellen, except you, has had a conflict.
Well, that's
And-
how everybody
and-
lives or works.
I know, it's a great thing that have the talent, but at the same time, I mean, we bumped up against that, and Rory, you know, you were on the evaluation and Sarah for block 50, because, you know, like everybody's got maybe I might have I might be the architect, I might buy it, I might play some role in it, so we're down to those in certain kind of positions that conflict, so we've never been conflict out. I know you didn't really go over what the process would be, but I might need to.
If it happens, there, for example, if you had full-time board members, you have 6, about 10 or 9,
No, we have 6 as a quorum.
but on the 10 total members.
Yes, we have 2 vacancies, so I'm like blanking out. You don't have it, Josh. I look at their little roster.
There are rules in place if situations like that occur, because there are times when the Oregon Supreme Court gets conflicted out of their own. The most recent one I recall is there was this like during PERS or retired state.
Yeah.
they all receive it, it's a conflict of interest, there are rules set up, so that you're not paralyzed. You reduce the number of eligible members, your quorum number would go down, the majority of the,
We have 11.
maybe a 9 total, if you had 5 or 6 that were, had actual conflicts of interest, you'd have a situation where 2, 3, 2 out of 3. So that situation does come up in the state, I'm not gonna say in the city, that right. Situations where you have a large board, where tiny percentage of them making decisions. Sorry.
Just think we might not have been able to cancel it.
I feel like anything to do with downtown parking, go on conflict of interest then.
See, the good news about downtown parking is that if you think about our role wasn't downtown parking, our role was communicating on the challenges with the budget. The model did not generate, has not generated sufficient revenue to cover the cost. So we have third party, reports that said to solve this problem and based on the demand for your on-street parking, you should be thinking about this. And so that's the communication that this board would send to council during the budget process. They would say, hey, you have in front of you this budget that for the 4th year, we have not had sufficient funds to do any banners, any downtown cleaning, any baskets, any of those things. What came out of this report would be this as an option to solve these things. And then council's the one who triggered that motion, may or may not, to have us move forward with paid parking. So I see it differently because it's not like we all sat down and said this would be, it was all based on third party technical information and the budget. It was basically, we were broken, they were broken model. So, the parking one,
It's a rule necessity.
because it's a broad thing for the community, is like you said, it's a broad thing. It's so not property specific or individual specific. This is something that would be a service and be a user, whoever uses that, which is not you or where you work. It's everybody. You don't, that's the other thing. You don't control any of the parking spaces. And and that's the other thing. The parking tax, it's very confusing to businesses. They think if they pay the tax, they're paying for 3 spaces in front of their building. That is not the case. There's 3,100 parking spaces within the parking district. You're paying a piece for everybody to have access to that. But people get confused. Oh, well, it says that we are, no, those 3 in front of yours are not yours. That's not how it works. The parking spaces are public property.
But like the businesses who are able to put little, outdoor spaces. Platforms. They get those 3 spots.
Only 4.
That's revocable for that, that's a whole nother ball.
They pay for those. They pay for those. In addition to whatever their taxes. That's another. They pay for those.
Is there a cap on this?
Is there a count?
Like a cap on how many we can have?
Yes, there is. And I don't anticipate any more happening because the program that we have, the grant program that will partially help fund those, it's sunset, it will sunset the first. So I doubt if anybody will do it on their own time. Maybe, but yeah, there is a cap on how many could go, and again, remove parking spaces to support that.
Side note question on that, those are revocable permits, right?
Yes, there's conditions to those platforms to be open for 2 meals a day, so many days a week, you have to keep them up. There, again, it's not administrative, since it's administrative public works. And the dining criteria.
Positive, they require revocable permit also.
I didn't keep them up, but I was doing it. I just.
Maybe an agenda item for another meeting.
Yeah.
I think we can really open that thing up. But anyway, I want to leave room for Stephanie on co-compliance, so if there's any other questions for Brian while he's here. Brian, thanks so much for coming.
Right.
We'll see you next year.
Yeah.
We'll run it back.
I'll see if we can change it up a little bit.
Okay.
I promise.
We have photos.
Nice to not see stuff, so. Okay, our last information report is downtown code information with Stephanie Myers, code compliance officer.
I don't have a presentation, I have a flyer. I have been assigned to planning as a sign inspector and code compliance officer for the last 3 years. And more recently, we've been getting a lot of complaints, about sidewalk signs. Being placed where they're not supposed to. We updated the sign code January of this year to make the rules more clear on them and permitting and enforcement to make it more acceptable. So this flyer is going to be going out on Monday with the parking tax information in the finance is sending out. So everybody that gets the parking tax will be getting this flyer as well. So we just kind of wanted to give a heads up. This is going down and be here to answer any questions.
So this is going in the envelope with the
Invoices.
billing invoices for the parking tax.
Yeah. Any other businesses that have the sidewalk signs are supposed to have a permit for a year. We don't have many of them right now, so we'll to get everybody up to par.
How much are those?
It's less than $100. Yeah.
Who's enforcing?
So I guess a little bit of history is we brought Stephanie on as a new position. Based on some council feedback about signs in general across the city and there are banners everywhere and it was a bunch of stuff. And so her position was created out of that feedback from council a couple of years, 4 years ago. Yeah, and then she's been focusing outside of downtown because she has to start somewhere and there's only one of her. So she does sign sweeps across the city and picks up signs and stuff. And so this is our first, it's our first attempt to start coming into the downtown core. So we wanted to educate, her goal is to educate first. And enforce.
I have 2 questions. What is a sidewalk intersection? What is it?
There's a definition code, but it's basically like the pathway where the crosswalks meet, that's where you stand across.
Like a
The whole belt.
clear, the whole belt.
The whole belt,
Yeah, that's
The ones where most of the signs are right now is not allowed.
correct. They're supposed to be adjacent to the business, it's supposed to be like up the block.
Number 2, signs may be removed if placed without a permit or in violation of the standards. Is it like sign notice? Or because where I'm going with it is, you go clear them out, and then the business is like, oh, it's got stolen, time to put another one out.
Right.
So how do they know that their site is in POC or is it? Street above? No, there's a thing, if we can target in impound, I understand this.
So, what I do with most right of way signs that I go and pick up, I have a spreadsheet that I keep track of, like, when I talk to the stuff. Normally if it's something like an A-frame sign, I'm gonna go talk to that person first, and I'm gonna give them something like this. And I'll keep track of like, okay, I've talked to this person. And then if they continue to do it, then I will confiscate it, and I will contact them again with correction notice, which is an enforcement notice.
Just wanted to,
Yeah. Yeah.
There's. Sometimes things disappear, they get. Just.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they'll know where, they will absolutely know
There's
where.
quite a few in these sidewalk intersections.
Yeah.
think that we just sort of.
Yes. We have to let them know that we took it, but also want them to stop putting it out there. So if they thought it was the one, then yeah, they'll just.
I want to see the retrieval fee.
Right now it's $55.
Does it go up on the?
It will become a violation, $250 and what from there too.
I think, this is great, this is gonna be great right now, but I think, at some point, this should have been, we want you all to be successful, we support downtown. Instead, it's like, you know, it's kind of harsh, because people are struggling downtown, trying to make a living, and then you're gonna tell them blah, 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 instead of saying, we wanna work with you, we want you to be successful, blah, 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 you know what I'm saying? I'm just throwing it out there, and this glass thing is a problem. Bank of America is completely mirrored. You know, and they're a huge downtown tenant. So you're gonna tell them we have to unmirror Bank of America's windows? It's a bank. Oh, well, I'm sorry, I'm just throwing it out, you know.
It's a valid thing to bring up, right?
Yeah, yeah. Most of the stuff that we deal with is complaint based. We have been getting complaints about windows. The way we look at the mirroring and the signage is different. And we want voluntary compliance. We want to go and talk to people. We're not wanting this to be harsh. We want it to be informative.
Okay, but what was the problem with the mirrored windows?
That's been in the code for decades. It's just never been enforced. The historic district enforces it more than we and the CB does, and so they're the same standard. It's been completed for so many years, and Stephanie's brand new. We've never had a person that's had the capacity to do the entire city enforcement at any point. And so we have gotten a couple of complaints about signage and windows and covering windows, and we have done some enforcement downtown for that currently when we've got complaints, but this is just our attempt at trying to let you all know that this is what the code has said for years, and we're not saying we're gonna like start citing people. So we want you to know that this is what the code says, this is what city council adopted years and years ago, no one's changed it. City council just re-adopted the sign code pretty much like a full package deal again. So this is still in there. This is now also applicable along our major corridors, like the NU3 zones. There's some of this is applicable about covering windows of commercial street, things like that. So it's gonna be much more of an enforcement lift for us because of the new code and the standards.
One part of the goal with it too is we've had some people that have done it really, like I know Bank of America has been there and they've had that for a long time. There are new places that are coming in and just covering their windows entirely. We want to prevent people from spending their money on something that isn't legal.
Okay, but I guess my question is, why isn't it legal? If you're a medical clinic, you don't want people looking in. If you're getting your hair done, you don't want people to look in. I see what I'm saying. So what is the thought process behind
It's scared
this?
birds.
Well,
There's other ways to pay for it.
I think we're talking the difference between ground floor two, not that I want mirror up. I mean, ground floor, we've always wanted it to be where you can see and be connected. It increases the vibrancy, it increases the experience of the people walking on the sidewalk and driving around and getting a sense of who and what we are in downtown. I mean, we talked about this when Jay came in and we were talking about the door potential things for security on the door.
Right.
It morphed into, well, what about the windows and being able to see in, because people have been doing things because of security issues. They don't want somebody to see what they have in there because they increase thefts and stuff. So again, especially on the ground floor, it makes a huge difference if you can see in and get a sense of that activity versus it's just all blinds, which is why you've heard me say a million times, I hate being on the ground floor here as an office user. 8 to 5 blinds go, we are not contributing to the experience that a pedestrian has. I'd rather all office be upper floor because that's different. Ground floor is supposed to contribute in a different way. I think what we're not giving credit to Stephanie for is that we have not enforced this for a long time for a whole bunch of reasons, all of you have mentioned. We haven't had capacity and now we have. And because of that, we have behaviors only because people weren't educated. When Shelley and I sat down with Stephanie, it's all about, we don't want her going out and removing. We want her to take the time and invest in the education piece first, because that's always what we've tried to do with the businesses so that they know what's coming, so they don't get their thing and have to pay $55. If after an appropriate amount of time, which is why they're going in the invoices, because that's a really good way. But then, you know, she will go to those that don't become in compliance and she'll talk to them first. She's not gonna go and the person's not gonna be surprised. Well, what will probably happen though is that a lot of businesses, the business owner is not necessarily the one that's at the cash register or the one that you see. It's a staff person, because Shelley and I run into that all the time, because we've tried to over the years, especially that some say you cannot have 6 of these sandwich boards 12 blocks away from your business. And we go in and we talk to somebody, but that's not the person. Then you go back and you think you're talking, that's not the person. So you don't even know if the right person is who you were talking to. So we have a little bit of that, so it may require a follow-up. Hopefully, if that's the right person, then they can implement the change. But we need this for streetscape. We're trying to work on that look and feel. And it's a whole bunch of these things that we're gonna need to touch, because depending on the building, there's a mess with these outside, and depending on the corner, people now are unable to cross from one side to the other without almost walking back into the street to get around it. So it's for safety, especially people with ADA, accessibility issues, they can't see it and they're using their canes. I mean,
May I ask, you said you're gonna set them up on Monday. Is there a timeline on what you're expecting to have it cut out, or in 30 days, or? As far as you're providing this information, what is the expectation of having the businesses or whoever's putting out signs sign up for a permit?
I think Stephanie's gonna start at one part of this downtown area and just start talking to people. I don't think that there's gonna be an expectation for people to get permits until she's educated them. Right, the goal is to educate, the goal is to let people know, to make phone calls, and then once she's made multiple contacts, we still don't have compliance, go down that route, but generally, right, what you've done with everybody else has been make contact and then tell them to get a permit, and then there's usually like a 30-day window, and then we move on from there.
But after this goes out, it's probably 30 days that I start talking.
Right, and so the sign at Rudy's, which is at Chemeketa and what, commercial or whatever, that's always been there. He can't pay for that because that's not in front of his store, correct? So now he can't be on that corner even if he gets it.
Yeah, but it's also an sidewalk intersection. So
Right.
it's not, right, it's not.
This one.
Will there be education on, for example, the areas that are allowed to have signs, because strategically, yes, you put the sign away from your restaurant to draw people in, especially if you're like in the middle of the street or things like that. What are the alternative options that you're providing to the businesses that can still bring that same effect?
There already has been.
no, it's a choice of you selecting a mid-block location. A mid-block location doesn't have signage at an intersection. It's mid-block, the signage on the building, it's mid-block. There isn't another option for
Just
signage.
because it has to be in front of the business, or if you don't have frontage, you have to get permission.
You have to go leave somebody else's around.
Allow
So it would be right out.
Right, so only if you don't have frontage, can you go somewhere else other than in your.
It sounds like a tricky situation. I can understand it being an uphill battle. As a downtown business owner, I guess recommend or encourage just the approach of it, because I hear where you're coming from, and I can hear the questions and concerns, like why is this happening? I think just the transparency of it, but I can see some pushback on this.
A lot of pushback about the city on different ones too, so.
Yeah.
People are very,
What did you find with you was?
I think it's $37.
Yeah, it's very.
I was only there for the year, but fees are going up July 1, so I don't know what the new fee is, but it's probably not gonna be, I'm guessing it's under 50 for the year.
How much is it?
37 right now.
Well, I'm going back to the windows, because you know, I'm gonna get past all sorts of stuff. If you have a bar, the OLCC, if it's just a bar, they want it covered. So how are you gonna handle, you know, and like, there's a lot of places that are bars that you can't see in and see what's going on.
So it's a percentage, right? It's 50% of the window area. So it doesn't,
And the lottery people say you have to have everything closed up too, so I'm just, you know, wondering.
right, and
Yeah.
Is that with liquor? 'Cause I thought that was only with dispensaries.
No, it's the lottery, liquor, you know, so that's what I'm wondering.
I don't know, like archives windows are see-through, Ritters are see-through, there's the first.
Well, they're
They're not strictly
restaurant,
bars,
yeah,
but
I'm
most-
talking about bars.
But also bars are required to serve food.
Not all bars.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
If you serve liquor, you're
They are.
required
Like
to
6
serve
meals.
food.
15 years.
I think it's a placement because if you think about where
If you
all
want
the lottery machines are, they're in the back. You really can't see them at the window. And most bars are not right up at the window either. They're in the back. The
I
sign is
haven't been out of the car in a while.
And I think there's other ways like sending things that you could create privacy. I know like we have downtown units and they've been told to put blinds up. There are things that you can do to create privacy. Goal would be for the pedestrian experience to have be able to like at least see through the glass and see.
Oh, well, when you're done.
And just be able to see through at least 50%, right, is what the code requires.
So this link went to page not found. And I only looked at it because when I happened to help a tenant get a sign. Want a gold star with my like people downtown. I believe, anyway, it was very, wasn't super straightforward because it says how to get a temporary sign, how to get a permanent sign, how to get a banner. And, you know, to someone who's like you say, struggling, busy, doing their stuff, and then there's the difference. Ultimately, I did it for them. And even it took me a few times, so asking departments. So you can make it super easy if this is going to go out in a neighborhood that's probably in this house because they want to get a burn tech in the first place. They can like say, hey, oh, I get a sign right here. Fewest barriers to compliance, of course, are always the best.
The piece that's missing from this, from my point of view, is related to all the questions that Sarah's asking. If I'm a business and I did this, what I don't know is those things that you said. That you're gonna go block by block. And you're going to touch base with anybody that this would be applicable to. And you're gonna make sure that they got this, and you're gonna do the education. And then they're gonna say, well, how long do I have until I have to get my permit? Or how long is that process? And you're gonna say, you know, I expect you to get the permit, you know, over the next 30 days. And if not, blah, blah, blah. Because when I look at this, I don't know. I don't know if I'm gonna know because I have my now fair get from fine, because I'm not following this. Is there any way that, I mean, it's fine to say I'm gonna.
It's printed and going to finance as we speak.
Oh, okay.
So we're not, and that link, we checked it the other day, so I don't know why it's suddenly not working.
Oh,
The bottom works.
the bottom is true.
The bottom works.
But that gets into the one that talks about every sign in the town that's confusing.
Just, you know, like I literally printed the
It's a
one for
sign
all of them,
that
and it has
yeah.
a link fixed,
To
so.
get out of the.
But if I put all of that in there, what's the point of me going out and talking to those people?
No,
So-
the approach, I think it's the approach and
No,
personally.
I think it would just be, like what I've done in letters, I would just say, I will, you know, I expect to follow up with you on this, over the next several months or something, that's all, that way somebody knows. And it doesn't say, it doesn't give you, doesn't have It doesn't say your name.
Yeah, well, then they can call it, we want them to call the permit
The
center.
permit center.
I don't want everybody calling me.
Well,
Make the planner answer.
I just wanna say this deserves a lot more conversation, but we are at our time and I would be respectful of everybody's time. I know this, and this deserves a lot more conversation, but, and Sarah, thank you for raising it about your feedback, because you are actively a downtown business owner and a retail one at that with your restaurant, and, this is the kind of input we need, and ideally it probably happens before, because this is no big code, so. But yeah, I think we should probably. But
The code's been,
I know.
it's been enforced, yeah, that's the difference, it's not in.
It's not an easy conversation, and I really hope that it's constructive feedback that prepares you for the questions that we foresee happening, or at some point, now you have the capacity to do it, and it's the time for it, it's just gonna be an uncomfortable conversation to have with people. And for me, it's how are you approaching it?
It's hard because I almost do the first one, especially that intersection part, like, well, okay, I have my setbacks in mid-block. The other 5 people didn't, that's, no one's gonna.
You do have your work, that's great, but I know you already know that, and you've already been through that.
Yeah. I've done enforcement for the city. So.
For a raise.
Trying.
Yeah.
But the goal is voluntary compliance and coming up with options and. So we don't want to just go out and say we can't do this, no nutrition.
Thank you. Okay, everybody, we are adjourned.
Did you know you can't board them?